The human rescued an alien girl. Her culture demanded a sacred bond. Part 5. The dawn ceremony was held in the largest chamber of the Elythian vessel. Thousands of witnesses had gathered, not just the original delegation, but others who had traveled from nearby systems when word spread what was happening. A human was being bound to an Elythian through the sacred Vareth Kel. It was unprecedented. It was historic. Everyone wanted to see it with their own eyes. Ryan stood at the center of the chamber wearing ceremonial robes that Counselor Nevin had helped him put on. They were silver and deep purple, the same colors worn by the Elythian delegation. His bandaged hands had been treated with Elythian medicine overnight, and the burns were already healing faster than any human doctor could have managed. He felt strange and out of place, but he also felt strangely calm. Whatever happened next, he was ready for it. Vera entered from the opposite side of the chamber. She was dressed in white robes that seemed to float around her as she walked. Her silver hair had been arranged in an elaborate style that made her look older and more dignified. Her leg was still in the medical brace, but she walked without assistance, her head held high. She was beautiful, and Ryan felt his breath catch as she approached. Eldamira stood between them, her ancient voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. She spoke of the Vareth Kel and its origins in the earliest days of Elythian civilization. She spoke of the sacred nature of life and the honor that came from protecting it. She spoke of the bonds that connected all beings, and the special bonds that connected those who saved and those who were saved. Then she asked Ryan to speak. Ryan had thought about what he would say all through the sleepless night. He had considered grand speeches and careful diplomatic language. In the end, he decided to just tell the truth. He said that he had not asked for this bond. He had not planned for it or wanted it or understood it when it happened. He had simply done what felt right, and somehow that had changed everything. But now that he understood what the bond meant, he was grateful for it. Not because it gave him any power or advantage. Not because it connected him to important people, but because it connected him to Vera. She was brave and strong and had risked everything for her freedom. She deserved someone who would stand beside her. If the Vareth Kel said he was that person, then he would do his best to be worthy of it. He looked at Vera and said that he did not know what their future would look like. He did not know if they would become friends or something more. He did not know if their bond would be easy or hard. But he knew that he would protect her and support her and be there when she needed him. That was what he understood the Vareth Kel to mean, and that was what he promised. Vara spoke next. Her voice was soft but clear. She said that when she fled from her arranged marriage, she had expected to spend her life running. She had expected to be alone, cut off from her people and her culture, always hiding from those who would drag her back. She had never imagined that a stranger from another species would burn his hands pulling her from the flames. She had never imagined that such a stranger would stand before her father and demand the right to protect her. She had never imagined that she would find her bond partner among the stars. But here they were. The universe had brought them together in the most unlikely way, and she was grateful beyond words. She promised to honor the bond and to honor Ryan. She promised to stand beside him as he had stood beside her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Elder Myra raised her hands and spoke the final words of the ceremony. The bond was sealed. The Vareth Kel was complete. Ryan and Vera were now connected by the most sacred tie in Elythian culture. The chamber erupted in sound. Some were cheering, celebrating this historic moment. Others were shouting in anger, unable to accept what they had witnessed. Taver stormed out without a word, his face twisted with fury. He would cause trouble in the future. Ryan was certain, but that was a problem for another day. High Diplomat Catherine approached them when the noise began to fade. His expression was difficult to read. He said that he had not wanted this outcome. He had planned for his daughter to marry Tavor and strengthen the alliance between their families. That plan was now impossible. The Varath Kal took precedence over any political arrangement. Vara was free from her marriage obligation. He paused and looked at Ryan directly. He said that he had underestimated humans. He had thought they were simple creatures, focused only on expansion and resources. He had not expected to find honor and sacrifice among them. He had been wrong, and he was not too proud to admit it. Then Catherine did something unexpected. He placed his hand on Ryan's shoulder in a gesture that Nevin had told him was reserved for close family. He said that Ryan had earned his place. He said that Vera could not have found a better bond partner. He said that their family was strange now, spanning 2 species and countless light years. But perhaps that was what the universe needed. Catherine departed with his delegation, leaving Vera with the choice of where to go. She could return to Elythian space and face the complications of her new status. Or she could stay on Kepler 442b and explore this new chapter of her life. She chose to stay. Ambassador Dunn helped arrange her status as a cultural liaison, a position that would allow her to live on the human colony legally while representing Elythian interests. It was a diplomatic solution that satisfied everyone who needed satisfying. In the weeks that followed, Ryan returned to his station on the mountain. But now he was not alone. Vera came with him, her leg healing rapidly under continued treatment. She wanted to learn about humans, she said. She wanted to understand the species that produced people like Ryan. They talked for hours every day. They shared meals and watched the sunset over the dusty plains. They told each other stories from their childhoods and their dreams for the future. Slowly, carefully, they became friends. What they might become after that, neither of them knew yet. The Varath Kal did not require love or marriage. It required loyalty and support and presence. Everything else was up to them. Word of the bond spread across human and Elythian networks. Other Elythians began arriving at human colonies, curious about these strange beings who saved strangers and asked nothing in return. Some came as diplomats. Some came as scholars. Some came simply because they wanted to see for themselves if humans were really as strange as the story said. Before he left, High Diplomat Catherine spoke with Ambassador Dunn one final time. She asked him what he thought of humans now that he had seen one past the ancient trials. Catherine considered the question for a long moment. He said that his people had encountered many species across the galaxy. Some were stronger than humans. Some were smarter. Some had technology that made human achievements look primitive. But none of them were quite like humans. He said that humans were reckless and confusing. They had no proper sense of self-preservation. They made decisions based on feelings rather than logic. They rushed into danger without calculating the odds. And yet, he continued, they also saved strangers from burning ships. They stood up for people they had just met. They faced unknown trials for the honor of those who had no claim on them. They loved deeply and fought fiercely, and never stopped trying even when the universe told them to give up. He said that perhaps the galaxy needed more of that. The story ended where it began, at a small atmospheric processing station on a dusty frontier world. Ryan and Vera sat on the roof as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Her head rested on his shoulder. His arm was around her waist. They were 2 beings from different stars, bound together by ancient law and simple kindness. They did not know what the future would bring, but they knew they would face it together. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, other species were beginning to hear the stories. Stories of humans who risked everything for strangers. Stories of a sacred bond that crossed the boundaries of species. Stories of hope and connection and the strange, wonderful, reckless creatures called humanity. The universe was watching, and for the first time in a long time, it was impressed. The human rescued an alien girl. Her culture demanded a sacred bond. Part 4. The ceremonial chamber aboard the Elythian vessel was unlike anything Ryan had ever seen. The walls curved upward like the inside of a great shell, covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to shift in the soft purple light. Hundreds of Elythians sat in tiered seating that surrounded a central platform where Ryan now stood alone. Their violet eyes watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. He was the first human to ever stand in this sacred space, and most of them clearly thought he did not belong. Elder Myra sat in a raised chair at the front of the chamber. She was ancient by any standard, her silver hair flowing down past her waist, her skin so pale it was almost white. But her eyes were sharp and clear, and when she spoke, everyone listened. She explained the trials of Varathkel confirmation. There were 3, and Ryan must pass all of them to prove the bond was valid. The trial of sacrifice would test whether his rescue was genuine. The trial of understanding would test whether he could honor Elythian customs. The trial of commitment would test whether he would sacrifice again. Younger Elythian male approached Ryan before the trials began. He introduced himself as Counselor Nevin, and he had been assigned to guide Ryan through the process. His manner was formal but not unkind. He seemed genuinely curious about this human who had stumbled into their most sacred traditions. The trial of sacrifice began. Ryan was led to a device that looked like a chair, made of crystal and light. Nevin explained that it was Elythian truth verification technology. It would read his thoughts and emotions and project them for the council to see. Any lies would be detected instantly. Any hidden motives would be revealed. Ryan sat in the chair without hesitation. He had nothing to hide. Elder Mara asked him to describe the night of the rescue. Ryan spoke simply and honestly. He had been working on a sensor array. He had seen the crash. He had gone to help because someone might be hurt. He had found Vera trapped in the wreckage. He had freed her and carried her out before the ship exploded. That was all. The crystal chair glowed with soft white light as he spoke. Nevin leaned close and whispered that white meant truth. The council was seeing that Ryan was being completely honest. Elder Myra asked why he had risked his life for a stranger. Ryan said he did not really think about it. He just acted. Where he came from, you did not let people die if you could save them. It was not complicated. The council murmured among themselves. Several of them looked confused. They had expected complex motivations, political scheming, personal gain. Instead, they found something they did not understand. Simple decency. Automatic compassion. The idea that saving a life was its own reason. Elder Mira declared the trial of sacrifice complete. Ryan had passed. The trial of understanding began. Nevin led Ryan to a smaller room adjacent to the main chamber. He explained that Ryan had 6 hours to learn enough about Elythian culture to demonstrate basic understanding and respect. If he failed to show proper knowledge during the questioning, the trial would be failed. 6 hours to learn a civilization. Ryan felt despair creeping into his chest, but he pushed it away. He could not learn everything, but he could learn something. He could show that he was trying. He asked Nevin to teach him the most important things, not the politics or the history, but the heart of what it meant to be Elythian. What did they value most? What brought them joy? What did they fear? What did they love? Nevin was surprised by these questions. Most outsiders asked about power structures and trade agreements. This human wanted to know about their souls. They talked for hours. Nevin explained the importance of bonds and connections in Elythian society. He explained the role of honor and how it defined a person's worth. He explained the beauty of their art and music, which was designed to be experienced with all senses at once. He explained the pain of being bond-broken, cut off from all connections, alone in a universe of togetherness. Ryan listened carefully. He asked questions that showed he was truly trying to understand, not just memorize facts. He asked about Elithian children and how they learned. He asked about Elithian elders and how they were honored. He asked about Elithian love and how it differed from human love. By the end of the 6 hours, Nevin was looking at Ryan differently. There was respect in his eyes now. They returned to the main chamber. Elder Mira asked Ryan to explain what the Varathkel meant to the Elithian people. Ryan spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. He said that from what he understood, the Varathkel was not just a bond between two people. It was a recognition that life itself was precious and that those who protected life deserved honor. It connected the saved and the savior in a way that benefited both. The saved gained a protector. The savior gained purpose. Together they were stronger than apart. He paused and then added something that was not from Nevin's teaching. He said that humans had similar beliefs, even if they did not have the same rituals. They believed that the lives of strangers mattered. They believed that helping others was its own reward. They believed that connection across difference made everyone better. Maybe that was why he had saved Vera without thinking. Because somewhere deep in human nature, there was something that looked a little bit like the Varathkel. The chamber was silent. Elder Myra's ancient face showed something that might have been surprise. She declared the trial of understanding complete. Ryan had passed. The trial of commitment began. Ryan was led to another device, this one more complicated than the truth chair. Nevin explained that it was a simulation projector. It would create a scenario that felt completely real. Ryan's choices within the simulation would determine whether Rayan mattered. He passed the trial. Ryan entered the device and the world changed around him. He was back in his station on Kepler 442b. Alarms were blaring. The atmospheric processors were failing, and toxic gas was filling the building. He had minutes to reach the emergency shelter, or he would die. He ran through the corridors, his lungs burning, his vision blurring. The shelter door was just ahead. Safety was just a few steps away. Then he heard Vera calling for help. She was in the medical bay, trapped behind a sealed door. The override panel was on the far side of the room, in the direction opposite from safety. If he went to help her, he might not make it to the shelter in time. If he saved himself, she would die alone. Ryan did not hesitate. He turned away from the shelter and ran toward the medical bay. He reached the override panel and forced the door open. Vera was inside, her legs still injured, unable to walk on her own. Ryan lifted her and carried her toward the shelter. His lungs were screaming. His legs were failing. The world was going dark at the edges. They reached the shelter with seconds to spare. The door sealed behind them and clean air flooded in. Ryan collapsed on the floor, gasping. Still holding Vera in his arms, the simulation ended. Ryan found himself back in the device, surrounded by Elithians who were staring at him with expressions of wonder. Elder Mira rose from her chair and approached him slowly. She said that in all her centuries, she had never seen anyone pass the trial of commitment so quickly. Most beings hesitated, calculated, weighed their options. This human had simply acted, just as he had acted on the night of the real rescue. She declared the trial complete. Ryan had passed all three. The Varathkel bond was valid. From his seat in the crowd, Taver stood and shouted a protest. This was wrong. This was an insult to their traditions. A human could not be bound to an Elithian. It was impossible. It was unacceptable. High Diplomat Catherine rose and silenced him with a single word. The trials had been conducted according to ancient law. The human had proven himself. The bond was real. Even a High Diplomat could not argue with what every Elithian in the chamber had witnessed. This strange human from a distant world had shown something remarkable. Not because he was exceptional among his kind, but because he was apparently ordinary. If this was what humans called basic decency, Then humans were a species worth knowing. Elder, Mira announced that the formal Varath-Kel ceremony would begin at dawn. Ryan looked across the chamber and found Vera watching him. Tears were streaming down her blue face, but she was smiling. He had done it. He had fought for her with nothing but honesty and willingness to sacrifice. Tomorrow, they would be bound together forever. Ryan smiled back. He still did not fully understand what that meant, but he was ready to find out. The human rescued an alien girl. Her culture demanded a sacred bond. Part 3. The Elythian diplomatic vessel arrived the next morning. It was massive, at least 10 times the size of any human ship in the colony, and it descended through the atmosphere like a silver blade cutting through cloth. Ryan watched it from the window of the main colony administrative building, where he and Vera had been brought to meet the delegation. His hands were still bandaged, and his burns still ached, but those were small concerns compared to what was about to happen. Vera stood beside him, her injured leg supported by a medical brace. She had not spoken much during the journey from his station to the colony hub. She seemed to be preparing herself for something difficult. Ryan wished he understood more about what was coming, but the translation system could only explain so much, and Vera had grown quiet whenever he asked too many questions. Commander, Lisa Park had arrived at the station shortly after dawn. Furious with Ryan for leaving his post, and then confused when she learned what he had done. She was a practical woman in her 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had served in the colonial administration for 20 years, and she had seen many strange things. But a human maintenance worker rescuing an alien diplomat's daughter was new even for her. The human diplomatic representative, Ambassador Claire Dunn, had arrived shortly after. She was younger than Commander Park, with red hair and a calm demeanor that suggested she had dealt with many crises before. She briefed Ryan quickly on what to expect. The Elythians were a powerful species with a large presence in this sector of the galaxy. They valued tradition and honor above almost everything else. The fact that Ryan had saved an Elythian life would earn him some respect, but the political situation was complicated. Ryan did not care about politics. He cared about the frightened girl standing beside him and the promise he had made to protect her from shame. The delegation entered the building in a formation that spoke of ceremony and importance. There were 12 Elythians in total, all dressed in robes of silver and deep purple. They moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy by comparison. Their pale blue skins seemed to glow in the artificial lighting, and their large violet eyes took in everything around them. At the front of the delegation walked a male who could only be High Diplomat Catherine. He was tall for an Elythian, with silver hair swept back from his face and eyes that burned with cold authority. He looked at his daughter with an expression that mixed relief with anger. Behind him walked another male, younger and harder. This one looked at Vera with possessive hunger that made Ryan's stomach turn. He did not need the translation system to know that this was Taver. The male Vera had been fleeing. High Diplomat Catherine spoke in the Elythian language, his voice carrying across the room. The translation system converted his words a moment later. He was grateful that his daughter had been found safely. He thanked the humans for their hospitality. Now he would take her home to fulfill her obligations to her family and her people. Vera stepped forward before anyone could stop her. She spoke in a clear voice that did not waver. Even though Ryan could see her hands trembling at her sides, she declared the Varath-Kel bond with the human called Ryan Cole. She stated that he had saved her life through sacrifice of his own blood and flesh. She named him as her bond partner under the ancient laws of their people. The room went silent. Every Elythian face showed shock. Catherine's expression darkened with fury. Taver looked like he wanted to kill someone. Ambassador Dunn leaned close to Ryan and whispered that he should stay quiet and let her handle this. Ryan ignored her. Catherine demanded to know if this was true. Had this human really entered a burning ship and carried his daughter to safety? Had he really been injured doing so? Commander Park confirmed it. She showed the medical records from Ryan's station. She showed the images of the crash site and the burned remains of Vera's ship. She showed the documentation of Ryan's burns. Catherine was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was strained. Thought he acknowledged that the circumstances appeared to meet the requirements of the Varath Cal. However, the bond required confirmation by trial. A human could not simply claim such a sacred bond without proving his worthiness. Tavor stepped forward and spoke for the first time. His voice was sharp with contempt. He said that humans had no understanding of Elithian customs. He said that this creature had probably planned the whole thing to steal what belonged to others. He said that the bond should be declared invalid, and Vera should be returned to fulfill her marriage contract. Ryan had listened to enough. He stepped forward to stand beside Vera. He looked directly at Tavor and spoke slowly so the translation system would catch every word. He said that among his people, saving a life created no debt. He said that he had done what any decent person would do when someone was in danger. He did not want payment or reward. He did not plan anything. He simply heard a crash and went to help. However, he continued, he would not allow Vera to be shamed or punished because he had done the right thing. If Elithian law said that his actions created a bond, then he would honor that bond. If Elithian law required him to prove himself, then he would prove himself. He would face whatever trials they demanded. He looked at Catherine now, meeting those cold violet eyes without flinching, but he would not stand aside while they dragged Vera back to a marriage she had risked her life to escape. He would not let her be treated like property to be traded between males. If that was what Elithian honor looked like, then maybe Elithian honor needed to change. The room erupted in angry voices. Several Elithian males stepped forward with threatening postures. Ambassador Dunn tried to intervene, calling for calm. Commander Park's hand moved toward her sidearm. Catherine raised one hand, and everyone fell silent. He looked at Ryan for a long time. His expression was unreadable. Finally, he spoke. He said that no outsider had ever spoken to him with such disrespect. He said that Ryan clearly knew nothing about Elithian culture or the weight of their traditions. He said that the human was reckless and foolish. But, Catherine continued, he was also brave. He had stood before the high diplomat of the Elithian people and spoken his truth without fear. He had offered to face unknown trials for the honor of a stranger. That was not nothing. Catherine declared that he would convene a judgment council. Ryan would be given the chance to prove the validity of the Varath Kel bond through the ancient trials. If he succeeded, the bond would be recognized, and Vera would be free from her marriage obligation. If he failed, the bond would be dissolved, and Vera would return to fulfill her duty. Tavor started to protest, but Catherine silenced him with a look. This was the law, Catherine said. This was how it had always been done. Even a high diplomat could not ignore the sacred traditions. Ryan felt Vera's hand slip into his. Her fingers were cool and trembling slightly. He squeezed gently, trying to reassure her. He had no idea what he had just agreed to face. But looking at the hope in her large violet eyes, he knew he would face it anyway. For her. For a stranger he had saved from a burning ship. For the strange bond that now connected them across the vast gulf between their species. The Elithians escorted them toward the waiting vessel. Whatever trials lay ahead, Ryan would meet them. That was simply who he was. The human rescued an alien girl her culture demanded. A sacred bond. Part 2. Vera opened her eyes and did not know where she was. The ceiling above her was made of gray metal, and the air smelled different from anything she had known before. She tried to sit up. The pain shot through her leg, and she fell back against the bed with a cry of surprise. Her heart was racing. Her thoughts were scattered and confused. The last thing she remembered was her ship spinning out of control, the ground rushing up toward her, and then nothing. She turned her head and saw him. A creature she had never encountered before was sitting in a chair beside her bed. He had soft brown skin and dark hair cut short. His eyes were small and dark, watching her with an expression she could not read. He was larger than any Elythian male she had ever seen, with broad shoulders and thick arms. His hands were wrapped in white bandages. Vera screamed. The creature jumped up from his chair and held his hands out in front of him, palms facing her. He was making sounds with his mouth, but she did not understand them. She pressed herself back against the bed, looking around desperately for a weapon or an escape route. She was trapped in an unknown place with an unknown being, and her leg was too damaged to run. The creature stopped moving. He stood very still and kept his hands visible. Then he pointed to himself and said a word slowly and clearly. He repeated it several times until she understood that it was his name. Ryan. He pointed at her and made a questioning sound. She hesitated for a long moment, then answered. Vera. Ryan smiled. It was a strange expression, showing his teeth, but somehow it did not seem threatening. He moved slowly to a small table and picked up a container of water. He offered it to her with careful movements, not coming too close, letting her reach out and take it herself. She drank. The water was clean and cool, and she had not realized how thirsty she was until that moment. When she finished, Ryan took the container back and refilled it for her. Then he brought food, simple things that looked safe to eat. He did not try to touch her or force her to do anything. He simply offered and waited. Slowly, Vera began to calm down. Whatever this creature was, he did not seem to want to hurt her. He seemed to want to help. Ryan went to a panel on the wall and touched several buttons. A moment later, a voice came from a speaker, speaking words she could not understand. Ryan spoke back, and then a new voice came through, this time in her own language. The translation system explained that she was in a small station on a planet called Kepler 442b. She had crashed nearby, and Ryan had rescued her from the wreckage before it exploded. She was safe now, and help was coming. Vera looked at Ryan with new eyes. He had saved her. He had gone into a burning ship and pulled her out before it was destroyed. She looked at his bandaged hands and understood what they meant. He had been burned. He had been hurt because of her. She asked the translation system to ask him why. Why had he risked himself for a stranger? Why had he been hurt for someone he did not even know? Ryan seemed confused by the question. He shrugged his broad shoulders and said something simple. The translation system converted his words for her. He said that he heard the crash and went to help because someone might be hurt. That was all. That was the whole reason. Vera felt something cold settle in her chest. She knew what this meant. She knew what his sacrifice had triggered, even if he did not. Among her people, the Elythians, there were ancient laws that governed such things. When someone saved your life through sacrifice of their own blood or flesh, a sacred bond was created. It was called the Vareth Kel, and it was older than their spacefaring civilization. It was older than their written history. It was one of the most powerful bonds that could exist between two beings. And Ryan had invoked it without knowing. She tried to explain this to him through the translation system. She told him about the Varathkel and what it meant. She told him that among her people, he was now bound to her by sacred law. She told him that this bond could not be broken or ignored. Ryan listened with a growing expression of confusion. When she finished, he shook his head and said something that made her heart sink. He said that he did not want anything from her. He said that saving her life was just the right thing to do. He said that where he came from, you did not let people die if you could help them. There was no debt. There was no bond. She did not owe him anything. Vara felt tears forming in her eyes. He did not understand. He was trying to be kind, but his kindness was making everything worse. If she returned to her people without honoring the Varath Kel, she would be marked as oath-broken. She would be shamed and cast out. Her family would disown her. Her name would be spoken with disgust. Everything she was would be destroyed because this strange creature refused to accept what he had earned. She explained this to him through the translation system. She begged him to understand. She told him that refusing the bond would destroy her. Ryan sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long time. She could see him thinking, see him struggling with concepts that were completely foreign to him. Finally, he spoke again. He said that he did not want to hurt her. He said that he did not understand her customs, but he could see that they were important to her. He said that he would not refuse anything if it meant she would be harmed. Vera felt relief wash through her, but also something else. Something she had not expected. This human, this Ryan, was willing to accept a sacred bond with a complete stranger just to protect her from shame. He did not ask what the bond required. He did not ask what it would cost him. He simply agreed because she needed him to. No Illithian male had ever shown her such kindness. The communication panel beeped, and Ryan went to answer it. Vera watched as he spoke with someone on the other end. When he returned, his face was troubled. He told her that his commander had been contacted by an Illithian diplomatic vessel. They were already on their way. They were demanding the return of the diplomat's daughter. Vera closed her eyes. Her father had found her. Of course he had. The High Diplomat Catherine always found what belonged to him. She had fled from an arranged marriage to a cruel male named Taver, hoping to disappear among the distant worlds beyond Illithian space. But she had not gone far enough. She had not been fast enough. And now her father was coming to take her back, unless the Varathkel could protect her. She opened her eyes and looked at Ryan. He was watching her with concern on his strange, soft face. He did not know what was coming. He did not know what she was asking him to face. But he had already shown that he would stand for her when no one else would. Perhaps. There was something special about these humans, after all. Vera reached out and took his bandaged hand in hers. She felt him tense with surprise, but he did not pull away. She looked into his small, dark eyes and made a decision. She would claim the Varthkel publicly. She would bind herself to this human in front of her father and everyone else. And together, they would face whatever came next. The human rescued an alien girl. Her culture demanded a sacred bond. Part 1. Ryan. Cole had been working the night shift at the atmospheric processing station for 3 years now. The work was lonely and the pay was decent, but mostly he stayed because he had nowhere else to go. Kepler 442b was a dusty frontier world at the edge of human-controlled space, and the mining colony here attracted people who wanted to disappear from their old lives. Ryan was one of them. He had left Earth after his divorce and never looked back. Now he spent his nights checking sensors and maintaining equipment that kept the air breathable for the 12,000 colonists who lived in the valley. Below his mountain station, the night was quiet, like all the others. Ryan was outside in his environmental suit, replacing a damaged sensor array on the eastern tower. The stars above were different from the ones he remembered from Earth, but after 3 years, they had become familiar. He knew their patterns now. He knew which ones were actually distant stations or ships passing through. So when he saw something bright streaking across the sky, trailing smoke and fire, he knew immediately that it was not a star or a normal ship. It was a spacecraft falling out of control. Ryan watched as the small vessel tumbled through the thin atmosphere, spinning wildly as pieces broke away from its hull. It disappeared behind a ridge of rocks about 2 kilometers from his station, and a moment later he saw the flash of impact. The ground trembled slightly beneath his feet. Protocol said he should report the crash to Commander Lisa, park at the main colony hub, and wait for a rescue team. Protocol said he should not leave his station unattended. Protocol said many things, but Ryan was already climbing down from the tower and running toward the emergency rover parked beside the main building. Someone might be alive in that wreckage. Someone might be dying right now while he stood here thinking about Protocol. He drove the rover fast across the rocky terrain, the headlights cutting through the darkness. The dust kicked up behind him in great clouds that would take hours to settle in the low gravity. His heart was pounding in his chest. He had not felt this kind of urgency in years. His life had become routine and predictable, and now suddenly everything felt sharp and immediate. The crash site was worse than he expected. The ship had torn a long scar across the canyon floor before coming to rest against a massive boulder. The hull was cracked open in several places, and smoke was pouring from the engine section at the rear. Ryan could see warning lights flashing inside the cockpit. He could smell something burning even through his suit filters. He climbed through a gap in the hull and found her Dot. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin was pale blue, almost luminescent in the dim emergency lighting. Her eyes were closed, but he could see they were large, taking up more of her face than human eyes would. Her hair was silver white and very long, tangled now with debris and blood. She was small and delicate, with fine bones that looked like they might break if he was not careful. Her leg was pinned beneath a twisted metal beam that had fallen from the ceiling. She was breathing. She was alive. Ryan moved toward her and knelt down. He could hear a warning alarm coming from deeper in the ship, and he recognized the sound. It was a power core destabilization warning. He had heard similar alarms during his training back on Earth. The core was going to overload. He had maybe 10 minutes if he was lucky. He grabbed the metal beam and tried to lift it. It was heavier than it looked, and the angle was awkward. He pulled harder, feeling the strain in his shoulders and back. The beam shifted slightly, but not enough to free her leg. He needed leverage. He looked around desperately and found a length of pipe that had broken loose from the wall. He wedged it under the beam and pushed down with all his weight. The beam moved. The alien girl made a soft sound of pain but did not wake. Ryan pushed harder, and finally the beam lifted enough for him to drag her free. Her leg was badly injured, probably broken in several places, but she was free. The warning alarm was getting louder now. The power core was going critical. Ryan lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing, lighter than a human woman of her size would be. He carried her back through the gap in the hull, moving as fast as he dared. The metal around him was growing hot. He could feel it even through his suit gloves. When he climbed out of the wreckage, his hands were burned where he had touched exposed surfaces without thinking. He ran toward the rover. Behind him, the ship was making terrible sounds, groaning and shrieking as systems failed one after another. He placed the girl gently in the passenger seat and secured the restraints around her. Then he jumped into the driver's seat and accelerated away from the crash site. The explosion came 30 seconds later. The shock wave hit the rover and nearly flipped it, but Ryan held the steering steady and kept driving. In the rear view mirror, he could see a column of fire rising into the dark sky. The ship was gone. Everything the girl had owned, everything she had brought with her, all of it was burning. But she was alive. That was what mattered. Ryan drove back to his station and carried her inside to the small medical bay. It was not much, just a bed and some basic equipment for treating injuries until a real medical team could arrive. He laid her down gently and removed his helmet. His hands were shaking now. The burns on his palms and forearms were starting to hurt as the adrenaline faded from his system. He looked at her face in the better lighting of the station. She was beautiful in a strange and alien way. Her features were delicate and symmetric, and her skin seemed to glow faintly from within. He did not know what species she was or where she had come from. He did not know why her ship had crashed, or why she had been flying alone through this remote sector of space. None of that mattered right now. Right now, she needed medical attention, and he was the only one here to provide it. Ryan treated her leg as best he could, setting the bone and wrapping it in a stabilizing cast. He cleaned the cuts on her face and arms and applied healing gel to the worst of them. Then he treated his own burns, wincing as the medication touched the raw skin. Finally, he sat down in a chair beside her bed and let out a long breath. He should call Commander Park. He should report the crash and the survivor. There would be questions and paperwork and probably trouble for leaving his station without authorization. But all of that could wait until morning. For now, he would watch over this strange girl from the stars and make sure she was safe. Ryan did not know it yet, but his simple act of kindness had set something profound into motion. Among her people, saving a life through sacrifice of blood and flesh invoked an ancient bond that could not be broken. He had burned his hands and risked his life for a stranger, and in doing so, he had bound their fates together in ways he could not possibly understand. The girl slept peacefully through the night, unaware that her rescuer sat beside her, unaware that everything was about to change for both of them.